Hi, I got a lovely message from a woman who is waiting for a webinar that I'm going to release. And it's about alcoholic behaviors in children long before we take a drink, right? And she asked me, she's really excited for it because she's got a child who is an addict and is now going to therapy. He's been sober for I think about 8 or 9 months and in a sober living and going to therapy, and they're trying to get to the root of what caused him to start drinking, right? What are the childhood traumas that start, that? Now, it's interesting. I'm going to say, I'm doing this early. I haven't released the webinar yet, but I want to talk about this because I don't want her thinking that there's something that triggered his alcoholism. Alcoholism is a mental illness. You're born with it. Okay? So people have an alcoholic, almost like an alcoholic gene, right? Now, some people have, for example, my mother, birth mother, that I just found a couple years ago, she's an identical twin, right? So that means identical twins run in our family. Doesn't mean that I was an identical twin, but it means that I could have an identical twin. I had a child. I didn't have an identical twin, right? But the odds are if my daughter has kids, she might have a twin. Twins. Get confused. You know what I mean? So it's in my DNA that this is going on. And somewhere up the chain, we probably have more twins in the family, right? So that's kind of the same thinking as alcoholism. If your child is an alcoholic addict and you're not, look back in your heritage. Did your parents drink? Are they alcoholic? Remember that a lot of people that have alcoholism don't drink out of a paper bag under a bridge. Some of them know, like, that their grandfather was an alcoholic. So they purposely won't drink. They really monitor what they drink because they're so worried that, somewhere in there, they're going to start drinking too much like their grandfather, right? So, but they'll overwork. They'll have all the characteristics of an alcoholic. I know a lot of alcoholics who don't drink. Okay? So if you have a child with alcoholism, most likely they were born with it. What makes a child start drinking and drugging? Some people say it's trauma. I don't know if that's true. I started drinking and drugging and I had no trauma. Like, I had stuff happen, but I wouldn't call it trauma. I don't think it's any different than other things that people had happen to them, right? I had, weird sexual stuff with family members and, unfortunate. And, I wouldn't say, some people have like really serious stuff. I didn't. I had a great home and had a great upbringing, and there was no drinking in the house, right? And I was adopted. So it was pretty evident that I was like this, I wouldn't say a black sheep. Maybe my family would, but I was different than them, right? And the minute I took a drink in junior high, I felt normal. I felt, thank God, right? I was always irritable, restless, and discontented as a child, full of fear, full of paranoia. I mean, I remember as a little girl, I would be in the car in the back seat. My mom would drive across a bridge and I would crawl onto the floorboards and throw a blanket or a coat, whatever was back there, over me, terrified until we got over the bridge. Normal kids usually don't do that. You know what I mean? So, I was just different from the get-go. Did I know I was alcoholic? No. Did my parents? No. They pretty much had a clue, though, once I started drinking, like I did, and doing any kind of drugs. Anything to change the way I felt. Anything to get comfortable. I remember one time I had a cold, and my mother, we had a closet in our hallway, and it was where we kept, mostly 2 shelves were medicine. The Band-Aids, the Bactine, you know what I mean? The Campho-Phenique, back in the day, I'm dating myself. The Alka-Seltzer, the Pepto-Bismol, and the NyQuil. Okay, so I had a cold, and I went into the hallway, and she poured me a cup of NyQuil. And I was little. I was 6th grade. Okay, I don't know what age that is, but I was about 6th grade. And I came in and I was, I couldn't sleep. I was coughing so hard. I was keeping everybody in the house awake. She said, here, honey, take this cough syrup and go to bed. And I did, and I slept. Well, about a week and a half later, she called me into the hallway. Maybe a week. And she pulled out an empty bottle of NyQuil. And she held it up to me and she said, have you been taking this? And I was, well, yeah, right? I had a cough. And she was like, Cookie, my nickname was Cookie. Cookie, you drank a whole bottle. I mean, we usually keep a bottle like this in the house for a year. Like, you only need to use it once. It knocks the cold out, right? You got a good night's sleep and you were fine. I think we're going to need some more NyQuil. That was long before I had a drink, right? I am just predispositioned like that, right? I'm naturally uncomfortable, and I'm looking for a way to comfort myself, whether it's cookies. I mean, as a kid, you could see my behavior as a child was different. There's so many examples. Over dramatic, seeking attention, right? I remember visiting my dad in California. I was in Washington State with my mom. That's where I grew up, in Spokane, Washington. And my dad was in California, Northern California. And they got divorced. And I went to, so you could say, oh, divorce is what caused it. That's not what caused it, because my brother is not an alcoholic. And he was more affected by it than me because he was older. So anyway, I went to see my father in California. And my father is a very distant guy. And, we just, I think it was because I was adopted. I don't think he ever bonded with me as his child. I don't know, right? It's way long ago, and he's a wonderful man, and we just never kind of clicked. And I get that, no worries on that. So anyway, we went to see him, and at the time as a child, I wanted his affection so bad. And I remember going down there to see him, and he came home from work, and I was so excited to see him, and we all sat down for dinner. And I went into my little room, the spare room where I was staying for the summer, and I laid on the bed, and I pouted and waited so he would come and find me. Right? So he came in, and he got, Cookie, you okay? You want, come to dinner. And he'd take my hand and take me to dinner. So the next night I wanted attention, so I did the same thing. And he came and got me. And then the next night he just called, Cookie, it's dinner. And the next night he didn't come at all. And I laid there. I was devastated. Now, I look back on that now and I see that is so manipulative. That is so needy and alcoholic, selfish and self-centered, right? Just me. So there are definitely signs before kids start drinking. Now, is it your fault? No. Now, maybe kids are born with this and some scathe through it okay because there's no trauma. And maybe some kids' trauma happens and they use that as their mechanism. It plummets them down into that more. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying as a mother, he needs to treat his alcoholism. He has the illness of alcoholism. It doesn't really matter how it started. It doesn't matter if, I know parents that think, oh my God, if we would have stayed married, if I wouldn't have married that guy, it was his stepfather, if, I could have been a stay-at-home mom, if I didn't have to work. You know what? It is what it is. You have to do what you have to do. And kids are resilient. They come through it either okay or not. Right? It's not, you can't determine that. You can only determine the love and and support you're going to give him with boundaries to move forward with his life, right? And they can talk about his trauma and they can work through his trauma. But if he gets in a 12-step program, he's going to be able to deal with the fact he has alcoholism and how to treat it daily, right? That is the answer. It doesn't matter if you know that being sexually abused at 14 or 6, or if you were beaten by your stepmother or whatever, you can know, like, this is what caused me to start drinking, will not keep you sober. That information is just information for you to process and heal your trauma, right, with a therapist. But that is a separate issue than this. This alcoholism has to be treated, whether something happened or not, right? This is a separate issue. People want to link them together. I believe that this is a separate issue. Do they complicate each other? Yes. Yes. Do they feed off each other? Yes. But one doesn't have to happen for the other. I know a lot of people that have serious trauma who are dealing with shit that aren't alcoholics and addicts, right? They didn't turn to drugs and alcohol. So can you see how those are separate issues? You might be a person that has both. I am, right? I've dealt with my trauma. I'm fine, right? I've done my steps for alcoholism, so I've let all that go. I've forgiven. I'm making amends for my own behavior, and I have a good grip on what's happened to me in life and accepting responsibility for it, my part, okay? But it is not what I know. It's what I do. This is what you know. This is a therapist getting you honest with your stuff. Acceptance, forgiveness, anger, rage. There's a lot of stuff going on over here. That you need to know. This is what you do. Alcoholism is not about what you know. It's about what you do. So even though I've done the steps and I know my character defects and I know where I'm wrong and I know my mistakes, that's not going to keep me sober. It's what I do. Prayer and action. Okay? I have got to be helpful. I've got to pray, ask God for help, try to add to the stream of life. When I am only thinking about my trauma, I am only thinking about myself. So if I stay in that mode of blaming my past and commiserating about that, not dealing it with a therapist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist who can help me move through it, other side, people get stuck in that and they can't quit drinking. They never get to the other side. They go to therapy for 30 years and don't come to a conclusion, right? Don't come to a healing. So if you're with a therapist who is just talking about the problem, you want to have them move you into the solution, right? The healing. You want a healer to start healing. And this is part of that. The steps will help you with that. But this is not going to help you stay sober. Does that make sense? And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but they really are two issues. Some people have just alcoholism. Some people have just trauma. Some people have both. You got to deal with this one and you got to deal with this one, right? This one can help this one. This one, this is action in itself. So while you're going to therapy, you got to treat your alcoholism. Okay, does that make sense? But don't think that trauma follows alcoholism. That alcoholism is always preceded by trauma. It's not. I know wonderful people raised in fantastic situations with parents that are billionaires, right? Living the life of Riley, and they're addicts and alcoholics. That one piece in their life, right? No trauma. And I know people with trauma like, oh God, and they're not alcoholics and addicts, right? So it's really important as a parent, you realize your son has an addiction. He has a disease called alcoholism. And all his trauma work is trauma work. And congratulations, he's willing to do that. But it doesn't mean that's why he's alcoholic. It doesn't mean that at all. If you look back at his characteristics when he was a little child, before the trauma, have you ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese and seen that one kid? And you've been like, holy shit, that kid is going to grow up and be a serial killer. You know what I mean? That kid is an alcoholic. You can kind of see it. I mean, no, you can't kind of see it. You can see it. I can see it. I know. I'm like, wow, that kid is me, right? That kid is me. So you can kind of see the behaviors, the selfishness, the self-centeredness, all the traits of characteristics of an alcoholic. You can see in children when they're young. Can you skirt that and raise them non-alcoholic? I don't think so. I think it's a roll of the dice. They might just grow up and be normal drinkers. They might be normal drinkers until they're 45 and then their husband leaves them and they start drinking. Or they could be regular drinkers, with the disease of alcoholism in their DNA, and then they retire. And once they retire, they start drinking. There's all different scenarios, and you are powerless over it. Okay? So as a parent, you need to treat your own recovery. You need to take care of your own recovery, right? That's the way this works. So if you need more information on that, please check out my website, KarenGardner.com. I have a ton of more information, all categorized by alcoholism or codependency on my YouTube page. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed. And wow, this is a really long one. Hope it helps. Thanks.